Former homicide detectives of Reddit. What was the case that made you leave the profession? My aunt was a homicide detective. Had been for a few years. What did it for her was when she witnessed an autopsy of a baby. I think specifically when they had to cut the head open. Autopsies on kids are pretty much a weekly occurrence for anyone working investigations in any moderately sized city. Yet I understand, but she lives in Georgia, just outside Atlanta metro area. I don't guess it's as frequent. Gotcha. I've been a detective for around 8 years now. I probably attend 8 to 10 a year. Keep in mind, every child death has to be investigated, to some that includes accidental as well as neglect/homicide. Every child death has to be investigated to some degree. Would that include a death that already had a known medical cause? Like if a child died during surgery, would some sort of report from the surgeon be sufficient? My cousin is a retired detective, and while he never went into details about his job with me, he gave me the impression it wasn't any one case that made him retire early, it was a culmination of all of them. I can only imagine the speed he has seen in those 20 years. Oftentimes an autopsy is performed to verify that the surgeon didn't do anything wrong. My father was a police officer and suddenly changed career paths to being a cartographer. When I was a teen, I asked why. His final straw had been showing up first on scene to a fire. The man outside was on PCP telling him and his partner his toddler started it. As my dad went around the building looking for a safe entrance, he found a little boy huddled. When he picked him up, his skin slid off like a glove. He was just holding this child. Skin splitting and sliding. Trying to get him to a safe area to be cared for. The man and woman tried to take him from my dad, saying they'd finish the job. Turned out the parents while high set their toddler on fire in the house, which then went everywhere. Somehow the kid ended up outside but burned so badly. My dad apparently came home, according to my mom. Sat in our rooms all night, going back and forth between me and my brother, just watching us sleep. The next day he went to a friend at City Hall and got a job using his cartography skills from the military and turned in his badge. He eventually went back to being an officer many years later, but ultimately left again for reasons I don't know. He went on the road as a long-haul trucker so that he didn't have to see people anymore. A friend of mine who was an EMT arrived on the scene of a crash where a car had driven straight into the side of a tractor trailer. Right where the rear's wheels are. The engine block had gone right through the midsection of the driver, a woman, and essentially replaced her abdomen. He came up to her and he realized he couldn't do anything. So he just held her hand as she died. It was hard to listen to him recount that story. Alright, this one got me. I'm done for the night. I remember taking an OHS course from an ex-cop. He decided being a cop wasn't worth it when it landed him in the hospital with life-threatening stab wounds. I'm pretty sure OHS was less stressful. What does OHS stand for? Occupational Health and Safety. My girlfriend's uncle is retired now but was a detective for the Paul Bernardo/Carla Homolka case. They were serial killers and rapists who recorded the horrible things they did. She would lure in teen girls and help in the raping and torturing of them to death. Their first victim was Homolka's younger sister Tammy. Carla Homolka tricked the police early in the investigation and got a deal for herself when they didn't know how involved she really was, and is currently living free under a new name. The uncle is always such a nice guy, never stops smiling unless someone brings up this case, which that family unfortunately does regularly. You can look up the details of the case on Google if you want, but fair warning, they really are disgusting. You mean that little detail didn't come up in the background check they should be requiring? When they see multiple name changes, that should be kind of a red flag. They recorded a videotape of them torturing and raping Tammy. During the course of Carla's trial, Her defense team painted a picture of her being a battered and abused girlfriend of Bernardo's who was forced into being a part of his crimes. Bernardo's lawyer was in possession of videotapes that showed Carla was an active and willing participant and possibly even talked Paul into assisting her with the murder of her sister. The intent was to introduce the tapes as evidence in Homolka's cross-examination during Bernardo's trial. For whatever reason, the tapes were never brought forward. Homolka ended up getting a very light plea bargain deal. She served 12 years for manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Bernardo. Once news of the tapes came to light, there was public outrage. The Canadian government ruled the tapes were, at this point, inadmissible as evidence and they were destroyed. The murder took place in 1990 and she's been out of prison since 2005. She's changed her name several times, remarried, had kids and was even volunteering at schools at one point. It's a stain on the history of the Canadian justice system, for sure. A man killed his wife, mother, twin boys and his daughter. Except he didn't stab them or shoot them, he locked their rooms and burned his own house to the ground. He had no remorse and turned himself in 2 days later. No idea what happened after that, as I handed in my notice that very evening. I asked my boss if I could post on his behalf because he doesn't read it. He said he left when he was stabbed to death by the subject he was chasing. Said the subject had him pinned and stabbed him 14 times. And the last thing he remembered was the subject collapsing on top of him. EMS revived him and he was critical for a long time. Found out his partner blew the subject's brains out while he was stabbing my boss. Boss said he retired as soon as he could and moved several states away. Edited to change sub to subject. Sorry guys. I was typing as he talked to me and was trying to keep it close to his way of speaking. I'm still at work now with him. I thought I read that wrong. When he was stabbed to death. Then I realized. Holy guy actually was stabbed to death and revived. That's a hell of a story. For being my boss. He's kind of like a personal hero for me. This happened to him back in the 90s. I've worked for him for a few years now. But he's really a hell of a guy. Couldn't ask for a better boss. He's helped me out countless times in my personal life and has helped me in my professional career as well. I'm glad he's here. I would guess that anyone with that kind of experience really has a perspective like no other. A good guy to know. For sure. My school resource officer used to be a detective. I was having issues with a student, so I would go to his office once in a while. He ended up telling me about the time when a mother was nursing her baby on a rocking chair, and her younger son was under the foot of the chair and it smashed his skull in. That's why I always felt gliders are best. As someone who's worked in a daycare infant room, gliders can and do pinch fingers of curious babies messing with them. But that seemed about the worst that could happen. Obligatory, not a homicide detective disclaimer. However, my grandfather was. In my hometown there was a drugstore that got robbed. There were 3 people working. A 17 years old, 18 years old and a 23 years old. After the store was robbed of nearly $30,000, the 3 boys were taken out to the parking lot, lined up, and shot in the back of the head execution style. This case was so out of the ordinary for where I live. And it was relatively big news. My grandfather, having a 17 years old himself, my father, was particularly bothered by the case. He was already a pretty heavy drinker and the case only made things worse. Unfortunately there wasn't a lot to go off of, and shortly after taking the case, my grandfather died of liver failure. I've always said that that case killed him. Unfortunately it's still unsolved. And the perp is likely dead. I guess we'll never know. Not me. but a member of my team prior to my joining. Traffic homicide. We investigate any and all deaths involving a vehicle in our city. It's large city in the American South where several interstate highways intersect. A suicidal male jumped into front of an 18-wheeler hauling a load of gasoline and was dragged under the bumper for a few hundred feet 100 m. A lot of it on the rumble strips on the side of the road that made the whole ordeal a lot worse. Like I said, this was before my time on the team, but I've seen the official investigation photos. There was not much left of his body. It was spread like ground beef. Even his clothes got ripped up and there was shattered bones everywhere. We had to shut the interstate down for almost a whole day while the biological hazard cleanup was conducted. The sight was enough for one of the investigators to ask to be taken off the team. Undefined. Just curious, how is it more biohazard than a deer or bear? Well, for one, the sheer size of the mess necessitated a cleanup. Families don't want to look at hamburger meat on the road during their commute. Human bodies also run the risk of contaminants. Humans spread disease to other humans easier than another animal. You know? I wouldn't want the runoff from this the next time it rains to get into the sewer system or...
Hey guys, if you like this video then smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more contents like this. And don't forget to press that bell icon to get notified for future videos. Thanks for watching. Click here to see more videos.